There is something you have never been able to prove. Not once in the entire history of our species has a man been able to know, through his own senses without instruments, that a child was biologically his. Every father who ever lived before the 20th century faced this in silence. Some of them knew it. Most of them simply never asked. That gap shaped more of human social life than almost any other single fact about our biology. It shaped how families formed, how grandparents loved their grandchildren, what we consider property, loyalty, betrayal. So how did they navigate it? In a world without tests, without proof, what did an early human man actually have to go on? And what did the people around him build in response to a problem with no solution? Only workarounds. The answer is buried in the behavior of people alive today, in genetics labs in Oklahoma, and in the memory of 822 children in Venezuela. Let's go back to the body first, because this is where the wager begins. You are a male primate. You have just mated. The woman in front of you carries no sign, no signal, no visible marker of whether fertilization occurred. You cannot smell ovulation. In nearly every other primate species, females advertise fertility with unmistakable physical changes that disappear after the fertile window closes. Human females do not. Concealed ovulation, researchers call it, though hidden might be more honest, since there is no evidence it was deliberate. It simply evolved that way, for reasons still debated. The consequence is not debated. You cannot know when conception happened. Months later, without tests, you cannot know whether the child now growing is yours. The anthropologist Sarah Blaffer-Hrdy has argued that concealed ovulation may have been one of the most consequential shifts in the social lives of our ancestors, not because it made infidelity possible, but because it made certainty impossible. Impossible certainty, in a species that invests enormously in children over many years, creates pressure. It creates the need for solutions. The first solution was the most intimate. You learned to read resemblance. Alexandra Alvergne and her colleagues at the Institut des Sciences de l'Evolution in Montpellier published a study in 2009 in Animal Behaviour, examining rural families in Senegal, a polygynous population where paternity uncertainty is an acknowledged feature of social life. What they found was that paternal investment, time, food, care allocated to a specific child was positively predicted by both facial and olfactory resemblance between father and that child. Men invested more in children who looked and smelled more like them. This is not a conscious calculation. No father in that study ran an analysis. But the signal was there, acting below deliberate thought. Something in recognizing one's own features in another face produced a deeper pull, a stronger impulse to protect and provide. Newborns, incidentally, are consistently described by mothers, especially in the presence of fathers, as resembling the father, even when objective observers see the mother's features more strongly. Whether conscious strategy or evolved instinct, it functioned as reassurance, a signal that reduced the threat of paternal withdrawal, and withdrawal mattered. In the Paleolithic, before stored surpluses, before any safety net beyond the group, a child deprived of a father's contribution faced measurably higher mortality. This was not a metaphor. It was a body count, which is why, somewhere in the deep social architecture of our species, a second solution emerged. It did not reduce paternity uncertainty. It dissolved the concept entirely. If you are still here at this point, you already know this channel does not deal in comfortable myths. Subscribe, because what comes next is the part most people never hear about, and it changes how you think about what a father even is. Among the Bari people of Venezuela, documented by Stephen Beckerman and his colleagues at Pennsylvania State University, there is no equivalent for the English phrase, the father. There is instead a category that translates roughly as the man who contributed to making this child's body. And a child can have more than one of them. The Bari hold a conception belief, documented in 61 societies across Amazonia as of the most recent comprehensive count, called partible paternity. The idea is biological, not metaphorical. A child is built from the semen of every man who slept with its mother during and around the pregnancy. Each of those men is a co-father with real obligations and real rights. Each is expected to bring food. Each is expected to acknowledge the child publicly. Beckerman's study examined 822 Berry children across multiple generations. Among children with both a primary father, the husband, and at least one secondary co-father, 80% survived to age 15. Among children with a primary father only, the survival rate was 64%, 16 percentage points. In a world where childhood mortality is the main filter through which genes pass from one generation to the next, 16 percentage points is not a margin. It is the difference between a lineage that persists and one that does not. The interpretation matters, and researchers are careful about it. The effect appears driven by provisioning more food from more sources, more protection, more eyes watching. The belief in shared biological paternity was, in effect, a technology for expanding the circle of investment around a child. Whether the belief accurately reflected biology was beside the point. It worked. A 2010 study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences by Robert Walker, Mark Flynn, and Kim Hill examined 128 lowland South American societies and found partible paternity beliefs were nearly twice as common as singular ones. Phylogenetic reconstruction suggested these were not recent inventions. They appear to run deep into the ancestral populations from which the Carib, Pano, Tupi, and Macro-Jê language families descended. No belief leaves a fossil, so we cannot know what Paleolithic people believed about conception. But this much is clear: there is more than one stable solution to the problem of paternity uncertainty. Some look nothing like the model of exclusive fatherhood many assume was universal. The third solution is the one you feel in your own family, even if you never named it. Think about your grandparents. Not all of them equally. Research beginning with studies by Harold Euler and Barbara Weitzel in the 1990s, extended across many populations since, shows the same pattern repeatedly. Maternal grandmothers invest most in their grandchildren. Maternal grandfathers and paternal grandmothers fall in the middle. Paternal grandfathers invest least. The evolutionary explanation is stark once you see it. A maternal grandmother is certain of her genetic relationship at every link. Her daughter is certainly her daughter. Her daughter's child, certainly her grandchild. A paternal grandfather carries uncertainty at both links. His son may or may not be biologically his, and his son's child may or may not be biologically his son's. In a world without tests, he is always investing on two layers of unverifiable faith. Kermit Anderson, an anthropologist at the University of Oklahoma, published a study in 2006 in Current Anthropology examining 67 worldwide non-paternity studies. Among men with high paternity confidence, actual non-paternity rates were around 1.7%, far below the 10% figure often cited, which comes from samples of men who already had doubts. For most men, most of the time, the instinct that a child was theirs was correct, but most of the time is not certainty. For a paternal grandfather, that uncertainty compounds across 2 generations, which means the pattern of grandparental investment. The fact that your maternal grandmother almost certainly spent more time with you than your paternal grandfather did is not just cultural preference. It is the fingerprint of hundreds of thousands of years of a species navigating a problem it could not solve directly, only route around. The roots were extraordinary: resemblance recognition operating below conscious thought, belief systems that dissolved exclusive paternity into networks of co-fathers, kin investment gradients calibrated, generation by generation, to the certainty of the biological link. None of these solutions used a test. All of them worked. What DNA testing actually did, when it arrived in the 1980s and spread into courtrooms and personal discovery kits in the decades since, was not solve a new problem. It solved a very old one. For the first time in the history of our species, a man could know, not suspect, not infer from resemblance, not rely on a social arrangement. Know You carry this history without realizing it. The way you look at a child's face and feel something hard to name, a pull, a recognition, something more than familiarity, the way investment follows perceived resemblance, even now, even when the test is available. The way grandmothers on your mother's side tend to show up more, remember more, call more. These are not accidents. They are architecture, built over millions of years by a species that could not answer the most intimate question it faced, and built remarkable things anyway, in the space where the answer should have been. The question for the comments is this: now that the test exists, now that certainty is available, do you think it has made things simpler? Or do you think it has only revealed how much of what we built around uncertainty we are not yet ready to dismantle?